see. Fear is a symptom of your deep sense of loss. If, when you perceive it in others, in other words, when you perceive in others fear, which is a deep sense of their loss, you learn to supply the loss. If, when you perceive it in others, you learn to supply the loss, the basic cause of fear is removed. Let's turn this around. If, when I perceive in you a deep sense of loss, because you've forgotten who you are or you're denying who you are, I know to supply the loss. And the basic cause of your fear is removed. I remind you of who you are. I don't confirm who you think you are. I remind you of the other 98% of you. I remind you of your connection with God. I remind you that the Holy Spirit is not part of the Trinity off in the ethers, but is nothing more than your right mind. So that you realize that there's more to you than you've been availing yourselves of. So that you might be inspired to avail yourself of it by giving your attention in that direction, rather than relying entirely upon your knee-jerk habitual responses to everything out of your memory. And as I do that, your fear is reduced. Now again, with reference to your behavior toward your brother, if when you perceive it in others, you learn to supply the loss, the basic cause of fear is removed. Where? In your brother. But first it's got to be removed in you. Thereby you teach yourself that fear does not exist in you, for you have in yourself the means for removing it, and have demonstrated this by giving it. Now, if you're willing to see your brother's behavior as a call for love, as a call for help, and you're willing to give that help to your brother, even if you don't know exactly how you're going to accomplish it, you have abandoned any prejudgments you have about that brother that would block you from caring enough to want to extend love. And that opens the door for the influx of love from the Father in you, through you, to your brother. Fear and love are the only emotions of which you are capable. One is false, for it was made out of denial, and denial depends on the real belief in what is denied for its own existence. Of the two, fear and love, one is false. And the one that's false is fear. The one is false, for it was made out of denial. Denial of what? Who you are. What you divinely are. What you really are. In spite of what you've been educated to believe you are. The divine one, the Christ. One is false, for it was made out of denial. And denial depends on the real belief in what is denied for its own existence. You see, you can't deny nothing. The only thing any of you go around denying is something real. Fear is what we're talking about, remember. If you are experiencing fear, it is because you have forgotten who you are and are giving preference to something else. And in giving preference to something else, you are denying what you really are. And you are denying something that is real. What you truly are is real. What you infinitely are is real, even though you think you are finite. One is false, for it was made out of denial. And denial depends, I'm going to say, on the reality of that which is denied for its own existence. In other words, for an act of denial to exist, you have to be opposing something that is real. Therefore, if you are in a state of denial, the very practice of denial, by reversal, is a statement of the presence of what is truly true, real with a capital R. You have to be willing to practice the art of contrary thinking here. One is false, for it was made out of denial, and denial depends on the real belief in what is denied for its own existence. Now listen to this, using the art of contrary thinking. By interpreting fear correctly as a positive affirmation of the underlying belief it masks, you are undermining its perceived usefulness by rendering it useless. You see, you, in spite of yourselves, believe that you are divine. In spite of your habitual thinking habits, you believe that you are real with a capital R, that you are eternal, and that you are therefore incapable of conflict of any kind. That is what you believe, and because you believe it, you argue against your suffering. You do everything you can to avoid your suffering. Why? Because you believe you do not deserve it. And the reason you believe you don't deserve it is because you know at the very roots of your being that conflict and suffering is not your birthright. Again, by interpreting fear correctly as a positive affirmation of the underlying belief it masks, you are undermining its perceived usefulness by rendering it useless. I am afraid because there's an underlying reality of me that it's my birthright to experience. And therefore I know that the suffering I'm experiencing cannot be valid. Therefore I can use the experience of fear as a confirmation, as an affirmation, as a concrete, conscious experience of my divinity by using the art of contrary thinking. And I can choose to place my anchor in that truth. And let it be dominant because it is dominant, truly. And as that awareness goes through your mind, your fear diminishes. You are undermining the fear's perceived usefulness by rendering it useless. Defenses, which do not work at all, are automatically discarded. You automatically discard them when you see that they aren't needed or they're a useless waste of energy. If you raise what fear conceals, if you bring to the surface what's behind the fear, if you raise what fear conceals to clear-cut, unequivocal predominance, fear becomes meaningless. What's behind fear? What's behind fear, you see? The ego would say, okay, what has gone on in your background? What are the foolish beliefs you've been employing that seem to make fear reasonable and justifiable? Let's get behind the fear. Let's get down to the root of the fear. But you will always look within the confines, the context of a separated mind where the fear is going on. When you get behind the fear, you discover what? You discover the truth about you. You discover your omnipresence. You discover the birthright of your omnipotence. You discover the actuality of singularity as your birthright, in which nothing conflicted can occur, and which therefore makes utterly experientially clear to you that there's no cause for fear. When you get behind the fear, when you get to what the fear is covering up, you get to the truth of you that says you are a divine being incapable of fear, needing not to exercise fear because you are invulnerable. And what happens then? You simply abandon the fear because it serves no purpose. It is a useless activity. That's what happens when you raise what fear conceals to clear-cut, unequivocal predominance. Fear becomes meaningless then. You have denied its power to conceal what? Love, which was its only purpose. Fear's only purpose was to conceal love. But you all think that fear has the purpose of protecting you, that it's useful, that it's essential if you're going to survive in this dog-eat-dog world. But no, you have denied its power to conceal love, which was its only purpose. The mask which you have drawn across the face of love has disappeared. Now, if the mask which you have drawn across the face of love has disappeared, it must mean that you have followed the direction, quote, to thine own self be true. You see? Honest. You've gotten down to bedrock. You've gotten down to the foundation of your being. You've gotten down to the truth about you, which is that you're not this little pissant mortal that you have thought you were, that you have been convicted in your belief about. And neither are any of your brothers or sisters who have been suffering from the same belief. If you would look upon love, which is the world's reality, see, no more of this, the world is an illusion. The world isn't real. If you would look upon love, which is the world's reality, how could you do better than to recognize in every defense against it, here's the art of contrary thinking, an underlying appeal for it? And how could you better learn of its reality than by answering the appeal for it by giving it? Well, you certainly won't be able to give it if you are going to call the call for love something else, like hateful behavior, or, the expected behavior from someone like that, you see. If you're going to call the call for love an expression of hate that you better protect yourself against, you're not going to be in any position to answer the call for love by giving it. Because you're going to withhold it. Why? Because you have decided to call the call for love something else. Continuing, the Holy Spirit's interpretation of fear does dispel it. And you can't say, oh, well, that's fine and dandy. Yeah, I would imagine the Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit's interpretation would dispel it. Well, remember, the Holy Spirit is nothing more than your right mind. So don't just blow it off, else you're blowing yourself off with a capital S. The Holy Spirit's interpretation, the interpretation of that which is nothing more than your right mind, the Holy Spirit's interpretation of fear does dispel it, for the awareness of truth cannot be denied. Thus does the Holy Spirit replace fear with love and translate error into truth. And thus will you learn of Him how to replace your dream of separation with the fact of unity. For the separation is only the denial of union. And, here's our art of contrary thinking, correctly interpreted, attests to your eternal knowledge that union is true. Miracles are merely the translation of denial into the truth. Shakespeare in Macbeth wrote the line, "Methinks thou doth protest too much." And the point of the statement is that when one is going around protesting something obsessively, unreasonably, it usually implies that whatever that one is defending himself against is probably the truth about them. Else they wouldn't be going overboard denying it. But likewise, if you're going around every day relying entirely upon your best judgments, you are in a constant state of denial of what you are. You are constantly protesting your birthright. You're constantly protesting your divinity. And by virtue of the art of contrary thinking, you are demonstrating the fact that you believe that you are divine, that the truth about you that you are denying really is the truth about you, and therefore isn't unavailable to you. It's just being ignored by you. And as I've now repeated many times, where we are in this book and in the explanation of God's plan for salvation and your process of awakening, we are giving our attention entirely to your honesty, to your willingness not to be denying the truth about you. Because as long as you are denying the truth about you, you are as caught up and engaged in the practice of mutual defense as everyone else is. And you therefore are completely inhibited from responding to a call for love with the love that will make fear a useless and meaningless element of your existence or of your brother's, so that transformation of mind can occur. Miracles are merely the translation of denial into truth. If to love oneself is to heal oneself, those who are sick do not love themselves. Therefore, they are asking for the love that would heal them, but which they are denying to themselves. Mind you now, I want you to remain aware of the fact that there's a difference between sickness and sin. One does not take pleasure and make commitment to being sick, but one does take pleasure in and make commitment to indulging in sin. Therefore, what we're reading right now does not apply to those who are indulging in sin. Those who are indulging in commitment to harming others and who take pleasure in it will not hear the expression of love until they arrive at a point of recognizing exactly the mechanism they are using and abandon it. But those who are sick are not committed to being sick and do not have a defensive shell around them that keeps them protected from feeling love that the one who engages in sin does. Those who are taking pleasure in hurting others do it from a highly defended place because they intend not to be swerved from their commitment. They intend not to be swerved from the high they get from succeeding at making someone else hurt. Now let's continue here, keeping in mind that we're talking about the sick, not the sinner. And I'm going to back up. Miracles are merely the translation of denial into truth. If to love oneself is to heal oneself, those who are sick do not love themselves. Therefore, they are asking for the love that would heal them, but which they are denying to themselves. How are they denying it? With simple, stupid beliefs. Well, I'm a mortal. I'm just a physical organism. I'm part of an evolutionary process. I function within the limits of that process. I function within the limits of the normal processes of matter, and on and on. What can I expect? It's just the way it is. But none of that's true about them. But what is true about them, they're denying to themselves. So therefore they are asking for the love that would heal them, but which they are denying to themselves. Here we are talking about a stray animal that comes to your door that's truly hungry for change. That's what the sick are. The sinners that come to your door are looking to be strengthened so that they might continue in their life commitment, and in the process of your helping them, they will screw you if they can as well. Until they see their behavior pattern, and until they recognize that it is not getting them fulfillment, and until after recognizing it, they abandon the practice, the shell, the well-reinforced shell, will not dissolve and become permeable so as to feel their hunger for what they're denying, love. Until they feel hunger for peace, then they will be able to hear the response of love to the call for love. Therefore, they, the sick, are asking for the love that would heal them, but which they are denying to themselves. If they knew the truth about themselves, they would not be sick. The task of the miracle worker thus becomes to deny the denial of truth.